The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the Forge Fitness, Nutrition, and Habit podcast. I am your host, Michael S. Parker, and in today's episode, well, it's going to be just a little bit different. The topic is one that all of us must contend with, and it's about turning your shame into strength. It's a tough topic. And after I recorded this episode and I was reviewing it, I decided that I wanted to add my comments from the very end of the podcast to the beginning. The reason is that the message, well, I felt that it was very important. It clearly needed to be one of the first things that you hear on such a potentially gloomy issue. Now, I'm doing this in case you don't make it to the end of the episode. Please, I would love if you would just listen to the whole thing. But I just really think that it's a crucial part of my message today. So after the music transition in just a few seconds, you're going to hear my message of hope at the very beginning. And I left it at the end as well, where it was originally. You're going to notice a transition to the original beginning about 2.5 to 3 minutes from now. Now, look, I know that not everybody is going to agree with my thoughts and approach to overcoming shame, but it works for me and thousands of the clients that I have worked with. So let's jump right in. I've got good news for you. You are the only thing in your way. And guess what? I don't know about you, but I'd rather me be in the way than anything else because I can kick my own ass. I can take action. I don't have to wait for anyone else. Nobody. I get to choose when and how I move past a problem in my life or a shame situation or a feeling of guilt, whatever emotion you want to assign. You own that. You have the power to change your perspective. You have the power to change your reaction. I've said this for many years that I don't want to allow the circumstances of life to control me. I want to choose how I respond to the circumstances of life because I don't get a fucking choice in almost all of it. We don't get to choose when we're born or when we die in the natural way. I have a deep empathy for people who struggle with feelings of shamefulness or inadequacy or low self-esteem, people who struggle to find joy in their life. It's really disheartening. And I think that's probably one of the primary reasons that I started Forge. Well, and I can go back even further. I think that's one of the reasons I even got into the entire wellness space and why I've pursued so many avenues of it so vigorously. I really see a deep need in people where they're just feeling so lost and a feeling of hopelessness. And man, that is a terrible place to be. But the good news is you control it. For the most part, you live in the United States of America. Most of your problems you created, but you can fix them all. You can fix your problems. These low-lining surface issues, feeling inadequate compared to a social media influencer, missing a couple of workouts, eating that ice cream quietly so that your spouse doesn't see, feeling shameful about that. All that stuff can be fixed. You just got to think about it. You actually have to embrace your flaws and recognize that it's just an indicator of where you are and you get to choose where you go. It's very hard to do. Simple, but really hard to do. I have faith in you. I know that you can absolutely reflect, take control of your life, have the power of conscious response, use the motivation, that moment that shame gives you, to turn it into a discipline that allows you to forever change your life. You can do it. And in this episode, we are going to learn how to finally conquer shame. It is a prevalent and invasive human sensation that is so complex. It has so many nuances, but it is heavily present in fitness, nutrition, and habit efforts. It has to be discussed. Shame is one of the most common emotions that we have to work through with clients to overcome. How many times have you or somebody that you know tried to lose weight or exercise regularly, reduce their food consumption, or improve their diet, or even eliminate harmful substances, and then they fail time and time again? They just fail. How many times have you heard the story of the person that lost 25 pounds and they just gained it all back, plus some? How many times have you seen people try a new fad diet and then they fail and then they revert? How many stories have you heard about people who try to break a bad habit only for it to resurface again and take hold? Shame is sadly a constant companion for many people. When you're trying to be fit, when you want to control your food intake and you want to make positive changes in your life, and shame gets in the way, which we're going to discuss in detail, it can be very discouraging. But today, I'm going to show you how to identify, corner, and manage shame so that you are no longer held captive by its oppressiveness. Today, you're going to turn your shame into a proactive fuel that's going to power you towards your goals, and it's going to help you become the best that you can possibly be, and doing that sustainably. So what is shame? Shame is a multifaceted emotion. It's usually conflated with guilt, but fundamentally, it's distinct in its own implications. Because whereas guilt pertains to actions, like just a single action, you did something and you're like, I feel guilty about doing that, is not the same as shame. Shame permeates the self, and it influences how individuals perceive their intrinsic worth. And this distinction is pretty critical in addressing shame effectively, particularly in the concept of personal responsibility and self-improvement. Now, as a fitness professional, I'm often faced with the challenges of having to coach clients through shame. And I want to be clear. I believe internalized shame that's related at least to fitness, nutrition, and habit can be a powerful call to action, and it can really instigate tremendous personal improvement. Shame is just our natural way that our consciousness, it illuminates the need to change in our thought process, maybe our approach, behaviors, or consistent behaviors like chronic behaviors, not acute behaviors. That would be more of a guilt base. There's also environments and then relationships. However, shame that goes unchecked or that is glamorized or it's overemphasized in your life or is used to get attention on social media or from your peer group, highly destructive. It's very destructive. In this episode, we are only exploring internalized shame and mild peer shame that's related to fitness, nutrition, and habit. I'm not by any means going to be speaking excessively about religious, cultural, societal, or familiar-based shame, or any oppression or prejudice. I'm going to be speaking of the internal shame and maybe some of the shame that is instigated by social media. My intent is to explore the concept of shame and how it affects your well-being in a general sense that is related to personal behavior that you control. It's my hope to expose the truth about this phenomenon and provide solutions that will manage your susceptibility to shame and hope that you find actionable steps to turn your shame into a motivation to improve. So let's be sure that we have a good understanding of the differentiation between shame and guilt, because the nuances are a little essential. Just remember that guilt is feeling bad about actions or behaviors that are acute. They happen now and again. You feel guilty for cutting somebody off in your car. Shame targets the self, making you feel inherently flawed or worthless. This internalization of negative emotions can be very damaging. It affects your self-esteem and most certainly your confidence. And recognizing the difference allows you to address the root of the emotion more effectively. And we want to always look for constructive paths forward. Now, I mentioned that I'm not going to go too deep into societal and cultural aspects of shame, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it though, the historical context at least, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the society comes, because shame, it's really deep rooted. It's often used as a tool for social regulation and conformity. And in many cultures, shame is employed to enforce what I would say just a societal norm, a series of behaviors that are expected. And that can cause feelings of inadequacy in some people. Now, by understanding its historical context, you can better appreciate how deeply integrated these feelings could be. But we have to start the process of disentangling personal worth from social expectations. And there are cultural variations in the experience of shame, because different cultures perceive and handle shame in a variation of ways. For example, in some societies, shame is a communal experience. My family grew up a very specific way, and I can tell you that there were some things that were considered shameful behaviors. And it was not necessarily something that other groups would say was shameful. And I won't go into all of that, but we all have instances that we can point to in our lives where we're like, oh yeah, that's a shame base because it's so institutionalized. So, and it doesn't just impact the individual, but we're talking about a communal and familiar impact, and it can intensify, the pressure to conform. But the other thing is you start hiding perceived imperfections, and it only refuels that sense of shame. But we have to recognize these cultural influences. It's really important that as an individual, we detach from external pressures and focus on personal growth and our own self-acceptance. From a physiological perspective, shame can trigger a cascade of neural and hormonal responses. The amygdala, the key player in brain's emotional processing center, just gets super aggravated. And that leads to a heightened stress response. So now you're going to likely get a surge in cortisol levels, and that can impair cognitive function in your decision making. And there's other things too. I'll get to that. But understanding the response is pivotal for anybody who's working on fitness, nutrition, or habit change, because you're going to encounter shame in your journey. And it can manifest physically as fatigue and a sense of doom or lack of motivation. That is precisely when social media becomes a major factor and inhibitor in healing and in self-discovery, because people will crawl back to their little echo chambers and the blanket and the comfort of communal negative reinforcement. Never in history has anybody been able to wallow and commiserate with other people over such personal matters to the astounding degree that we're able to do that with social media today. We are not built to wallow in self-pity and be reinforced continuously by other people who are also searching to find a negativity above positive change. Destruction is way easier than construction, and negativity is way easier than positivity. And social media is just a cesspool. The brain's response to shame is very complex. When I was doing my research on this, it got a little overwhelming. So I'm going to keep it simple. But it does involve various neural pathways and hormones. So the activation of the amygdala, we already talked about that. But the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thought and decision-making, becomes less active. It starts to disengage, and it makes it harder for you to think clearly. And that can lead to this terrible cycle of negative self-talk. And then, of course, now you're not motivated. There's no inspiration, and it impacts that mental and that physical health. Now, the hormonal impact of shame on the body is, of course, related to cortisol, as we talked about earlier, but it is our stress hormone. And elevated levels of cortisol can affect your sleep, your appetite, your energy levels, your sense of well-being, your creativity. And it also can put you in this cycle that is very hard to break. And for those of us in the fitness realm, understanding the hormonal impact is critical, as it can explain why physical progress can stall. You can hit these really terrible plateaus. You have this sense of your body's just not doing what you need it to do. Maybe you don't even feel like even getting it to do what you know you should. You're skipping workouts. You're basically saying, I'm not good enough. And then you start to self-criticize, and you're like, yeah, you screw it. We know that there are physical manifestations of shame: tension, fatigue, illness. People can experience a lack of motivation to exercise or eat healthy because of shame, because it diminishes their sense of self-worth and capability. So we got to recognize these physical signs early. Mind, body. Identifying it will help you address the roots. And that should help you prevent long-term setbacks in a fitness journey. So how do we recognize shame objectively? Objectively, it requires objective assessment of one's emotional landscape. This involves distinguishing between internalized feelings of inadequacy or external pressure or expectations from others. For beginners in the fitness domain, this can usually manifest as a reluctance to engage in certain exercises due to perceived inadequacies, and specifically the fear of judgment. Now, it's really important to cultivate a mindset that views these feelings as signals rather than definitive truths, right? It's just telling you. It's not true. It's just telling you you need to make a change. So identifying the internal versus external sources for shame is very helpful, because an internal one that's the easiest to fix, because it's self-imposed. Now, it does stem from personal beliefs and a self-perception. And like I said, there is religious and societal and cultural implications. Moving all that aside, talking about internally. Now, it's so difficult to objectively look at ourselves and realize that sometimes we're the problem. And it's getting worse and worse, I think, from what I've at least experienced in my career, which is now almost 25 years. I think people are more reluctant to change their bad behaviors. I'll give you just an anecdote. I was a young man in the late 90s, and I was starting my career. And one of the things that I have noticed has changed significantly, if I were to just look back to, let's just go to 2000 to 2005, within that block. Self-help books, audio books, things like that. Like, you could name them off. Like what was there? Was this Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Peter Rucker? The list goes on and on and on. I could probably John C. Maxwell. The list goes on. There's all kinds of these authors, and they were making huge waves. They were selling out arenas because people were so desperate to improve. That shit ain't happening anymore. You would go to a gym in the early 2000s, and almost every salesperson, every manager, every trainer, you go in the break room, and they're usually doing something constructive. These were driven people. Now in gyms, like back in, maybe when's the last time I walked into a gym break room? It's probably been a half a decade, but that's a fair amount of time, right? It's a 20-year span. And no, that's not happening anymore. Everybody's on social media and they're looking at nonsense. So think about that. We have a lot of reluctance to think about what are the mistakes that I'm making and how can I improve. That's like I said, this is an anecdote, but it is my opinion that it seems to be worse than it used to be. There's just a lack of self-awareness. It appears. Now, anyway, coming back to what I was going to say, understanding the origin of the shame can help you address it more effectively because you have to develop a strategy to counteract the influences. Let's say influences because influencers are part of the problem. Social media influencers. I'm going to get to that. So let's talk about developing a little bit of emotional awareness, right? Actually, let me break it down to the power of conscious response. I wrote about that in the 90-Day Habit Transformation book. It's actually, let me turn that chapter. Sorry for those of you who are only listening and not watching because you're not going to be able to see the power of conscious response. Okay, so the reason that I even came up with this is a tool to help people better understand how they can make change conscientiously. There we go. In fact, I actually want to read you really quickly. I had come up with this methodology for myself. This was a personal approach that I started using with clients and it worked really well. And it had everything to do with the ability to emotionally be aware. And I'm going to break down how I use the power of conscious response, at least for myself, and how I wrote about it in my book. Essentially, there's 5 steps to it. But I want to read you a quote. Like every single one of the main chapters in part 1 of the book has a quote, and that quote is literally me framing the chapter. So when I went in to write each chapter, I started with just this quote. And for the power of conscious response, I want to read this to you because I think that this is a powerful segue into solution seeking for shame. And I quote from myself, I control my thoughts, feelings, and actions. I am the master of my mind and my own body. I am aware, thoughtful, and deliberate in my actions. I will not allow external forces to control me. I will not allow my negative thoughts to control me. I will be kind, gracious, loving to others, and most importantly, to myself. That is how I framed the power of conscious response with the expectation that it would be a roadmap to allow me to constantly move away from feelings of inadequacy and demoralization, self-demoralization. So I'm going to go into this a little bit more, but I'm just going to tell you the way that I did this. And I broke out in the book was I said the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be an instigation. Now, back when I wrote the book, originally, when I had the first draft, I used the word trigger. But then it got hijacked by social media and younger people because everything triggers them, right? Oh, I'm triggered. And I felt that it kind of lost its potency. I decided to cause it an instigation because, man, you don't want to be instigated. When you get an instigation, this is something that causes you to have a reaction, an emotional reaction. This is where we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. And so I thought, okay, so there's going to be stuff throughout the entire day, no matter what I do, that is going to cause me to feel instigated. And some of those are going to be internal and some of them are going to be external. And I thought to myself, well, what is something that's foolproof that I could use no matter what? And so the second thing is there's an acquisition. You get instigated and you acquire that, right? So that feeling gets you and then you become aware of it. So that's what the acquisition is, the awareness of it. But it's not necessary the comprehension of it. That's the third thing. You have to finally comprehend what it is you're feeling. And then you have to compare it. That's the fourth thing. Compare it to what? Well, compare it to what your intended outcome is and compare it to what your behavioral expectations for yourself are. So your response, which is the fifth thing, is controlled conscientiously. Now, this is not a perfect science because our emotions are extraordinarily powerful. But I wanted to just show that I talk about that in length in my book. But let's just break it down a little bit further. So cultivation of emotional awareness. I suppose we could just say that's the key to recognizing shame. This involves regularly checking in on oneself. You have to acknowledge emotions without personal judgment. That's tough. You also have to identify and understand the origin of the shame. Those things are both important. Understanding is important, and you need to know where it came from. This comes from mindfulness, self-reflection. Individuals can become more attuned to their emotional states, which will make it a lot easier to identify when shame is influencing your behaviors and your mindset. I'll give you a little tip, one thing that I've been doing for many, many years. Sunday morning is my new morning where I do this. It used to be Saturdays, but I moved it to Sunday because it just works better for my schedule because I have to work every morning, and Sunday is usually the only day that I don't have coaching calls in the morning. So here's how I did it, and I continue to do to this day. Every Sunday morning, I will take 5 to 10 minutes and reflect on my week. Usually what I'll do is I'll go through my notes and see all the things that I had on my agenda to do that week. And we have a CRM system, and we have a workflow, an operational workflow system that you can classify and move things around. And is how much of that stuff got into the done pile, the digital done pile. And then also, how did I respond to other areas of my life? How did I respond to professional situations, and how did I respond to personal situations? And I'm very good at remembering what has happened because I'm conscientious about it. And then I think, did I handle that the way that I want to handle it? Remember what my tenet was in the beginning of The Power of Conscious Response, the quote that I had read you guys? It was about this. It's about taking personal responsibility for my own behaviors and my emotional responses and doing my best to manage it. I want to be able to look back when I'm older and be really proud of the decisions that I made in my life under emotional distress. I think that's something that people are missing again. So anyway, coming back to this, idea of self-reflection at least once a week and considering, did you do the right thing? Are you moving towards the person that you want to become, or did you take steps away? If you took steps away, don't classify that as shame. Classify it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to recognize it and then make sure that if it happens again, that you do better than the last time. That's all you have to do. Progress is 1%. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're trying to load a piece of software and it says 1%, it's taking forever, but that's not the same. Progress in the human mind, progress in the human body, 1% matters because it accumulates. I talk about accumulation all the time. There are tools and techniques that you can use to recognize, and journaling is one of them. It allows you to explore your feelings in a safe way, where you are the only detractor and you can put that aside. You have to look for patterns, and you have to look for the instigators or triggers, whatever you want to call it. There's also therapies or counseling that can also provide professional guidance. They help individuals unravel more complex emotions and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Self-reflection and self-improvement practices, they foster a deeper understanding and acceptance of oneself. And that is the road to personal growth. Contrary to its negative connotations, shame can be recontextualized as a call to action. It serves as an emotional indicator that prompts introspection, or hopefully it does, and a reevaluation of your values and your actions. Now, in the fitness realm, this might translate to setting more realistic goals or seeking professional guidance if you just keep failing over and over again and you just don't know what's going on or what to do, or adopting a new, more effective training methodology. So let's clarify values and goals. Shame was definitely going to highlight misalignment between actions and values. That's why you have to use that word. You have to be able to reevaluate values and set goals that match. Otherwise, you're contradicting yourself. You're having a fight with yourself. Individuals, you can create a roadmap for personal growth. Now, the process, of course, identifying what truly matters. You have to figure out what you really, really want and what you need. And allowing shame to serve as a guide toward a more fulfilling and authentic life choice is a good idea. It creates resilience. So let's talk a little bit about that. Identifying and encountering shame and then overcoming it, or at least even taking steps towards overcoming it, will build resilience. It's just like resistance training. Each instance of facing and transforming shame into action will fortify your ability to handle future challenges. Yeah, practice it. The resilience is not only beneficial in personal fitness, it extends to other aspects of your life. It does enhance your overall well-being and your confidence too, because you get over things faster and you move on. We're not made to wallow. Anyway, transforming shame into motivation is an interesting concept, because for those of you who know me or have listened to any of my content before where motivation is a topic of discussion, you know my stance on motivation. I'm not going to go into that here because I could do an entire episode on the myth of motivation. In fact, I wrote an article on that. If you want to go to the Forge blog, you can find it at forgept.com. The blog there has all kinds of information. All those articles are written by me, 95% of them. So, okay, well, let's talk about motivational force. I'm not saying motivation doesn't exist. I'm not saying motivation is wrong. I'm saying that people misunderstand what motivation is. Motivation is a catalyst. All right. I always like to think of motivation as a lighter. The little flint and steel on a lighter that creates that little spark, that's motivation. All of the fuel that's in the lighter is your discipline. The motivation is instantaneous. It's just gone. Motivation is a feeling. Understanding that shame can give you a feeling of motivation, that is what you leverage. Okay. That is what you're after. Now it's a force, but you have to acknowledge that it's present without self-judgment. You don't dunk your lighter in water. We talked about self-reflection, identifying root cause. You want to examine them through the lens of personal responsibility. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You can't always view shame as failure. It should be seen as an impetus for growth, pushing individuals to overcome obstacles and achieve their aspirations. Now, when I'm talking about shame here, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. I'm not talking about heinous crime shame. I'm talking about day-to-day feelings of inadequacy shame here. I'm talking about you failing on a diet over and over again, right? I'm not talking about something horrific, right? Massive acts of terribleness. And so just before everybody now is everybody's a prick. So you know what I mean. So anyway, we want to reframe shame as a growth opportunity and leverage the temporary motivation that it gives us, and we can foster that into discipline, and that's where that resilience comes in. We have to change the narrative around shame. View it as a stepping stone rather as a stumbling block. If you see shame as a signal for growth, you can embrace the challenges that come with it, and you can do it with a proactive, conscientious mindset. You're making conscious decisions towards improvement. You can take all of your failures, or at least perceived failures, and you turn them into lessons, and you move towards the correction. And then that is what personal development is. So what are some practical strategies? Let's just quantify these a little bit better. Mindful reflection, regular self-reflection, identifying the source, goal setting, making sure that you're establishing clear, achievable goals that align with your personal values. And then, of course, you want to seek the guidance and experience of a professional. It could be a therapist, be a counselor, it could be a coach, it could be a really damn good personal trainer. All these people can be very helpful, but in a professional sense, right? Because they can tailor their advice and their support to help you on an individual basis, or at least they should. We do at Forge, but I know there's plenty of incredible fitness professionals, personal trainers, and even therapists out there that just do wonderful work as it relates to the individual. But there are other ways that you can do this through community engagement. Connect with others that share similar experiences and values. A supportive community that offers positive validation and encouragement without allowing you to just wallow in your self-pity. They'll help you start to mitigate feelings of isolation that are associated with shame. Shame isolates if you're not careful. But you have to avoid taking all of your problems to social media for them to be magnified, reinforced, criticized, or exploited. Think about it. That's all it is, right? It's reinforced, magnetized, criticized, and exploited by other people. Don't give other people that power. Some things are not meant for the public examination, and do it weekly. All right. Well, let's talk about the interplay between shame and fitness, because and when I say fitness, I am also including diet, nutrition, right? I'm talking about all of the things related to wellness, right? When I say fitness, nutrition, and habit, when I'm speaking about shame, it's all of those things. So it is one of the biggest problems that I've noticed in the last probably 15 years is comparison with others or unrealistic expectations. Social media, with its curated portrayals of perfection, man, that can exacerbate these feelings, leading to a very skewed perception of your progress or what's reasonable progress. And it starts to cause you to doubt your own capabilities. Social media is just making this so difficult for everybody. You have to recognize the destructive influences and focus on your personal growth rather than any form of external validation. I'm not saying that external validation isn't important or necessary in certain ways, but negative external validation is what I've been preaching about for the last 35 minutes. Don't go in those rabbit holes. Navigate social media and perception. You have to actively engage. It's a double-edged sword. I get that. I get that social media, especially when it relates to fitness, is a double-edged sword because while it provides inspiration, you see all these great videos. You get to learn a lot of interesting things about how to lift, different ideas for exercises. You learn more about diet. You learn more about nutritional science, all of these great things that social media allows us to do. I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. Not only that, though, but you can see other people who are doing great work, and you can see some of the changes that people have basically taken responsibility for and improved. But social media mostly just creates unrealistic standards and fuel comparison-driven shame. Constantly comparing yourselves. I actually get a little frustrated when clients will send me pictures of a social media influencer, it's almost always women, and they say, I want to look like this. It is a common problem. Learning to curate one's own social media experience and focusing on personal progress over perceived perfection is how you maintain a healthy self-image. It may not surprise you to learn that my social media, I don't follow a lot of people. And the people that I do follow are almost all friends, family, and clients. I don't have a lot of stuff that pops up on my timeline, nor do I really scroll my timeline. I'm the worst friend on social media because the chances of me liking something is rare because it's going to have to be right there and I'm going to have to almost accidentally see it or to have to be in a story because I don't spend much time on social media at all. Anyway, set personal benchmarks rather than comparing yourself to other people and focus on incremental progress, 1%. Celebrate small victories. It reinforces that positive behavior, rebuilds your confidence, and it reduces the impact of all this external pressure. I was thinking about this just as I was talking. Environment. People always say, oh, the Forge gym looks so cool, and you can't see all of it. There's a lot more in here, but yeah, it's very, very well lit. We really love environments. And I find that I work out better when I'm in a great environment. And I think that it's not just about the environment of a gym, it's the environment that people create around you. Creating a supportive and positive fitness environment is really helpful. Surround yourself with people who are encouraging, people who choose uplifting fitness spaces, people engaged in activities that foster joy and fulfillment. They always say that if you want to be a millionaire, don't hang around poor people. I don't mean that to be derogatory, but that's just a very common saying, and it is true. And we know it's the opposite too. You hang out with people who are not behaving in a way that is appropriate, the chances of you getting into the process of behaving inappropriately as well is elevated. Coming back to this concept of the holistic fitness approach, I really think that that's important. The integration. I've said it before. One of the things that bothers me in the wellness space is that we silo. We put fitness in a box and nutrition in a box. And only till recently has anyone even said a fucking thing about habits. It's always been fitness is over here and diets over here, fitness and diet and fitness and diet. And they never crossed over. You have the people who only dieted and the people who only worked out. And there was very little on the in between. And I'm talking about general population. I'm not talking about athletes. And I think now that there's been a really good, healthy crossover in a lot of ways, but then of course now what you're just getting is the clash of fads, together. But anyway, holistic approach basically just means the integration of physical, mental, and emotional well-being into your wellness practice, into how you want your body to be well. When you address the underlying emotional components like shame, you're able to cultivate a more balanced and sustainable fitness journey. And as I always say it till I'm blue in the face, sustainability is key. You want to be as fit at 20 as you are at 90. Relatively, if you understand what I mean there, right? You're not going to be as fit at 90 as 20, but relatively as fit. You want to be as fit as you can at any age all your life. So you have to embrace vulnerability. You are going to have to really acknowledge your imperfections and celebrate that incremental progress. It's very difficult for people to do. It's always somebody else's fucking fault. So mindfulness and fitness is a big thing here. You got, when you hear mindfulness now, I think in circles or social media, everyone thinks yoga or meditation. Well, no, they can enhance your fitness journey for sure. What it does is it clears the noise and it kind of gives you a deeper connection between your mind and body. You're present in the moment. You're a little bit more self-compassionate when you do those kinds of things. But I wasn't really meaning using yoga or Pilates or some of these more mind-body style of modalities for exercise. That's not what I meant. I'm talking about really considering mindfulness in everything that you do throughout the day, balance, integration, and accepting your imperfections. Embrace them. Now, that doesn't mean that you're perfect as you are. Anybody who says that I'm perfect as I am, they're probably a prick. Nobody's perfect. We have to understand that there's going to be setbacks. We are all flawed. It's the natural part of the human experience. And it also, for those of us who are willing to hear and to change, allows us to approach fitness with more patience and self-compassion. And when you accept that and you constantly battle the dragon that is shame and your resilience improves, it only manifests as a healthier relationship with yourself. I was just talking to a client today and her and I were just discussing, she said, I made a mistake last weekend. I don't remember what she had. She said she ate something and, oh, right. It was a bag of dried fruit and she didn't realize it had 40 something grams of sugar in it. And I was like, yeah, but look at all the other things that you've been doing, right? We talk about this and I had to remind her and she's like, thank you for the reminder. But, I said it in the last episode is that in wellness consciousness, you have an X and a Y axis. You have constructive behavior, you have destructive behavior, you have duration, and you have intensity. All of our clients have to check in and I can see how many workouts they've done and I can just see everything. And she had blue check marks on every single workout for the last 3 weeks. And then she had one bad day with eating and then she missed one workout. in the last 3 weeks. So where's the destructive behavior? I'm not seeing that. Because if I were to compare that to the 3 weeks prior to that, where she was struggling with consistency, I saw a 100% improvement. Not even a 1%. It was 100% better because she missed workouts for 3 weeks. But then she hit 3 whole weeks of workouts and had just missed one, but she promised she's going to do the remaining 2 this week. She's winning. That is exceptional work. Each step forward, no matter how small, deserves your acknowledgement. Not arrogant acknowledgement, but the mindfulness acknowledgement. Practice builds momentum. It reinforces the positive behaviors that ultimately lead to more significant achievements and sustained growth. This is long term. I think shame pretty much is forever. We're going to have to contend with that emotion for the rest of our lives. You have to embrace shame as a positive force. You have to understand it objectively. You can transform it. It's a debilitating emotion if you don't, but it can be a very powerful catalyst for change. So I've got good news for you. You are the only thing in your way. And guess what? I don't know about you, but I'd rather me be in the way than anything else because I can kick my own ass. I can take action. I don't have to wait for anyone else. Nobody. I get to choose when and how I move past a problem in my life or a shame situation or a feeling of guilt, whatever emotion you want to assign. You own that. You have the power to change your perspective. You have the power to change your reaction. I've said this for many years that I don't want to allow the circumstances of life to control me. I want to choose how I respond to the circumstances of life because I don't get a fucking choice in almost all of it. We don't get to choose when we're born or when we die in the natural way. I have a deep empathy for people who struggle with feelings of shamefulness or inadequacy or low self-esteem, people who struggle to find joy in their life. It's really disheartening. And I think that's probably one of the primary reasons that I started Forge. Well, and I can go back even further. I think that's one of the reasons I even got into the entire wellness space and why I've pursued so many avenues of it so vigorously. I really see a deep need in people where they're just feeling so lost and a feeling of hopelessness. And man, that is a terrible place to be. But the good news is you control it. For the most part, you live in the United States of America. Most of your problems you created, but you can fix them all. You can fix your problems. These low-lining surface issues, feeling inadequate compared to a social media influencer, missing a couple of workouts, eating that ice cream quietly so that your spouse doesn't see, feeling shameful about that. All that stuff can be fixed. You just got to think about it. You actually have to embrace your flaws and recognize that it's just an indicator of where you are, and you get to choose where you go. Are you the person who hides in the middle of the night eating snacks out of the pantry so that none of your family members see it? It's not easy. Oh, it's simple. Oh, it's very simple. Just don't do it. But how unfucking helpful is that? It's very hard to do. Simple, but really hard to do. I have faith in you. I know that you can absolutely reflect, take control of your life, have the power of conscious response, use the motivation, that moment that shame gives you, to turn it into a discipline that allows you to forever change your life. You can do it. Anyway, that's it for today. Go out there, remake yourselves,